Shalom and welcome to Temple Talk from Jerusalem, Israel. Rabbi Chaim Richman here together with Yitzchak Reuven. Today is the 12th day of Menachem Av, the Consoling Father, 5779. It's the 13th of August, 2019. And this Shabbat, the Sabbath of Consolation, Shabbat Nachamu, it is Parshat Va'etchanan. And this Friday is the unsung, amazing biblical holiday of the 15th of Av, Tisha B'Av. Lot to share with you this week, lot to talk about. The unbelievable Torah portion of Va'etchanan, beginning in Deuteronomy chapter 3 and verse 23, with Moshe's prayer to come into the land of Israel. Amazing. All about the land of Israel. The whole focus is on performing the commandments in the land of Israel. But before that, before we get to the exciting connections between Parshat Va'etchanan and the Sabbath of Consolation and the elusive holiday of the 15th day of Av, on the 15th, Yitzchak and I are pretty excited to share with you our first our eyewitness impressions of the history that was made this past week on Sunday, on the 9th of Av, at the Temple Mount, where we were privileged to be amongst those 1,729 Jews who ascended the Temple Mount on the 9th of Av. It was an amazing experience. It was unprecedented for a number of reasons. It was unprecedented because it's the first time that a Jewish holiday coincided with a Muslim holiday, and yet the Temple Mount remained open for Jews. It was a record number of Jews. In fact, last year, I think it's almost twice as many as the Jews who ascended last year. And then I just saw the number for 2017 was only 1,000 Jews.
I can give you
the exact figures.
But keep talking while I find it.
But that was definitely a record, the number of Jews that were allowed up. And the main thing is the main thing, which is that the Muslims on the Temple Mount were making a tremendous effort, also historic and unprecedented, to make sure that the Jews would not be permitted to come up on the Temple Mount. They assumed that if they flexed their muscle, that if they were violent, that if they threatened more violence and unrest and disturbances, they assumed that the police would close the mount, and that is not what happened.
I just want to say, I have the record here. We posted it yesterday from 2011 through 2019. From 2011 through 2013, the mount was closed on Tisha B'Av to Jews. That was during the police administration of Aronovich, who was a former minister who was very, very hostile to us, who wanted to go on the mount, and an enemy, basically, of the Jewish people. 2014 was open, 20 Jews went up. We must have been among them, because we've gone up every year, you and I, Rabbi. 2015, a big leap in numbers to 300. 2016, 400. And 2017, 1,263. Last year, 1,440. And this year, 1,729. I also want to point out that the Muslims on the Temple Mount on Sunday who were, quote, celebrating, I say quote because they weren't celebrating, they were rioting, their holiday of Eid al-Adha, which ironically is a holiday which commemorates something which took place in Arabia, but they wanted to have sole possession of the Temple Mount. They didn't just happen to be there. 60,000 Arabs went up. That was because they were called upon by the Jordanian-controlled Waqf and the Palestinian Authority, who wanted them to riot, and they wanted them to prevent Jews from going up. That was the sole purpose. When I was coming in the morning, Rabbi, on the train to get to the old city, there were a lot of Muslims on the train, and they were dressed up. It was obvious they were going there, and you could feel the tension. You could cut it with a knife. They were going with one thing in mind, and that was to make a big stink and prevent us from going up.
You mean it wasn't a holiday of joy, peace, and love for the Muslims?
No, it wasn't a holiday of joy, peace, and love. It actually is a holiday where thousands and thousands and thousands of animals get slaughtered. But
anyway,
they didn't slaughter us.
We get there early in the morning, waiting outside the gate of the Temple Mount with hundreds and hundreds of Jews who came really from all over the country. They were praying the morning service. They were praying the special prayers for the day, the special additions to the service, dirges, morning prayers for the destruction of the temple, and waiting to go up at 7:30. And the hours went by, and in the meantime, there's this huge commotion that we hear. Even down there on the bottom, outside the Western Wall Plaza, waiting online, we hear guns going off on the Temple Mount. Stun grenades. We see the smoke rising. It's like it feels a little bit like witnessing the destruction of the temple from a distance, and the rumors going back and forth. News headlines coming in that Netanyahu decided that the mountain is going to stay closed, and then that's denied, and we're there because. Where else is there to be on the 9th of Av? This is the place to be. We want to be seen there by God. We want to show with our feet, like the expression, like vote with your feet. We want to show that this is the natural place to be seen in on the 9th of Av and on every day. And this is our innermost heartfelt desire, is to show God that we're sick and tired of mourning, as we've been telling you, and that we want the situation to change, and that we're ready to change the situation, and that we love this place, and that we'll do anything for this place, and that we'll do anything for him and his honor. And I say that because, people say the weirdest things. Like, people commented on our Facebook stories, like, what did you accomplish by going there? Like, why would you want to go there? Someone is writing, like what is it exactly? It's like, how do I explain to you that it is would you talk that way about your own heart? Like, would you talk that way about that which is like closest to you? Like, it's so pathetic that we need to explain why this is important. This is everything that we are as a people. This is not something that you can allow to be ripped apart from you. Anyway, make a long story short, it looked hopeless. It looked like we weren't going to be allowed up.
In fact, you and I had said, that the status quo is that Jews are allowed up between 7:30 and 11 each morning, 5 days a week. And we said, well, stay there till 11, because obviously once it's 11, they're never going to break the status quo. That, according to the politicians, is the most holy thing there is, the status quo. So as 10 o'clock rolled around, we're waiting.
It's a fast day. It's a 24-hour fast day. We're roasting in the sun. And all of a sudden, it's like 11:15.
Yeah.
They opened the gate. And not only
they waved us in.
They waved us in, but usually there's a whole procedure that you have to show your ID papers, and they have to go over every single person. Yes, you can go in, you can't go in. This was just like the floodgate open, and like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds at a time were able to go up. And albeit it was only for a very short time, it wasn't for the regular walk that we usually go on. It was very, very short, just to be able to walk there, as is our custom, as is our religious obligation. But when we got there, we saw the most incredible scene. It's hard to describe to you, the literally tens of thousands of rioting Muslims. And the police,
thousands of police had formed a human chain.
A strong force were keeping them back. And the mobs were more than unruly. They were really bloodthirsty.
And while we were up there, they were also firing stun grenades, and I believe
it was like a war zone. But what we came to appreciate with tremendously deep, heartfelt appreciation as soon as we finally got up there after waiting so many hours, is that all that time that we were waiting, the police were working to try and clear a path for us. And when we got up there, the Jews started going up. The police were so happy to see us that we saw that they were so glad that this worked. But they were forming like many rows of like human shields to like separate the masses, the hordes of attacking Muslims from the Jewish worshippers, and
the Jews on the Mount were singing and praying, and the police. They were not focused on what the Jews were doing.
So you have to appreciate the feelings involved, the emotion, the high-pitched energy of realizing what this day is for the Jewish people, the significance of this day being the day of the commemoration of the destruction of the temple, and everything that's ensued in Jewish history and world history since then, and what it means for us as a people without the Holy Temple, and our entire goal and dream and aspiration and purpose towards the rebuilding of the temple. And then we get up there, and then we are confronted with this incredible scene. It's like from Dante's Inferno. I can't even express to you the intensity of the specter of violence that was hanging in the air, and it was terrifying. Really, it was terrifying. To see the tremendous hatred on their holiday of peace, love, and all that jazz, and they're screaming at us, and they're throwing things, and the police are separating us, and it was our chance to pray and to say the things that were important, and we got a chance to do that. And then the way it's described in the media, as disturbances and as extremists, and it's insane. It's absolutely, the whole equation is so insane when you try to explain and just look at the difference. You know what? Usually under normal circumstances, and there's no normal, but under regular circumstances, the police keep close eye on the Jewish visitors, the Jewish worshippers, and they try to prevent them from praying, and they try to watch them that they shouldn't do anything antagonistic or anything confrontational. But in this case, you know what? The police were not really watching us. They weren't really next to us because they knew that we were not the problem. It was the difference between us and them is so clear. The difference between what you might call like our so-called unrest or
our provocation would be praying.
Our provocation would be that we would be crying. Our provocation would be that we would be singing, and that we would be overcome emotionally and saying Shema Yisrael, which is what we did. And their provocation is basically that they're out to kill. And there were a number of policemen that were hospitalized. And we're just really so appreciative of the decision that was made by the Minister of Internal Security and apparently by Prime Minister Netanyahu. It's unclear what his involvement was exactly.
But he did take the credit for it.
But yes, to let the Jews go up because someone up there realized that to capitulate to the specter of Muslim violence and not to allow Jews to ascend the Temple Mount after having made all their arrangements and all of their and all of the difficulties in getting there and in doing what has to be done in order to go up, to be seen there by God. When you broadcast that message to Jordan and to Saudi Arabia and to the Palestinian Authority that we're ready to relinquish all of our rights and all of our sovereignty and to quash Jewish civil rights on the Temple Mount, then you're broadcasting a message of our total failure and doom. Mm-hmm. Because if we give in on the sanctity of the place, which is supposed to be the holiest thing in the world to us, then what are we as a people? Where are we going? What is our focus? I just can't describe to you the impact that this visit had on all of us. And again, when we visit the Temple Mount, we're not tourists. We're not going to tour the Temple Mount. We're not going you can't even call it to visit. The word is ascend. We ascend to the Temple Mount because that is the word used by our sages to describe the experience of the pilgrim who goes to be seen before God on the Temple Mount, and to be there on that day, which is the most profound day, the most complex day, the most evocative day in the Jewish calendar in terms of the dynamic of our relationship with the temple. That's the day to express what we're really feeling. We go and we visit the Temple Mount on Passover. We go and we visit the Temple Mount on Sukkot. It's not the same thing, pretending that you're like a holiday pilgrim. It's not the same thing as going there on Tisha B'Av and saying, this is where I belong because I want to reverse this history, because I want to make a statement that mine will be the generation that will make all the change.
Now, Gilad Erdan, the Minister of the Internal Security, did point out that this is the second time this year that he allowed enabled Jews to get onto the Mount during a Muslim holiday. The other time was on Jerusalem Day, when it was also Ramadan, and that was also a big effort. But I have to also say that the current Muslim holiday is continuing through tomorrow, I believe, and the Mount has been closed to Jews, to non-Muslims, since Monday. So
But this has been the so-called status quo for some time now.
Right. So this was a big victory.
Even under his authority, that on a Muslim holiday, it's been closed to non-Muslims. But the difference here was that it wasn't only the Muslim holiday; it was also Tisha B'Av, which is a day that Jews en masse want to be represented on the Temple Mount.
The other precedent-setting event on Sunday was that we did go up, and not only after the hundreds of people who went up with us, another wave of people were led in. And in the afternoon, they also opened it to Jews to go in. It's also important to note. But we went up after the status quo hours, and that was also called into question. Well, how could you let the police? Was he a police? The Katzin. What's his title in English?
The commander of Jerusalem district?
Yeah, the commander of the district. He was questioned, how could you let Jews go up after the hours of the status quo? And he pointed out that the Muslims themselves had started their prayer an hour later, but for the sole purpose of preventing the Jews from going up, and he would not play into their hands.
It was very devious. And then you look at the criticism in the press voiced by, let's say, the Palestinians or by Jordan, that Israel violated the sanctity of Al-Aqsa, and Israel the
saying that patriotism is a last refuge of a
to which a scoundrel clings.
Right. So the Temple Mount is the last refuge for the Palestinian Authority and for Jordan, because people aren't interested. The Arab world is not interested in their so-called plight anymore, because they see that who they are, and so the last thing that they can grasp at is trying to rally support for the Temple Mount Al-Aqsa, as they call it.
Which has nothing to do with Islam.
Has nothing to do with Islam, and basically nobody's taken the bait. But after the fact, the Muslim countries will come out and say, yes, Israel's wrong. I mean,
so they come out now and they said that Israel violated the sanctity of Al-Aqsa by using force. What happened here? Analyze this. Look at the situation. The Muslims did everything they possibly could through violence, through the promise of even worse violence, to make sure that Jews would not be able to come to the Temple Mount. And Israel didn't stand for a change. And the police worked with tremendous zeal and diligence and great dedication and self-sacrifice, and putting themselves in danger to enable Jews to, yes, be able to come up and ascend to the Temple Mount, as is our religious responsibility. And so they have no choice now but to say that that Israel endangered the sanctity. What is the sanctity exactly for the Arabs? They should be able to hold the Temple Mount as a bargaining chip, as a
hostage,
a ransomed hostage, basically. It was extremely, extremely important to us spiritually to be able to do this, and all over the world, Jews are sitting and reciting their prayers and mourning, or at least acting like they're mourning, and begging God to do something about the situation, begging God, as it were, to build the temple, begging God to show His face, to return to us, and all of these empty statements, because what happens if God is waiting for us? Because God did return the Temple Mount to us, because the temple is our responsibility to rebuild. And if we want anything to change, this is the way to do it. And that's the other thing that is so moving about what we're telling about here, is that, the situation is changing. Years and years ago, when we first began this kind of activism, and this kind of educational outreach about the importance of the Temple Mount for the Jewish people, we were speaking to generations of Jews who were taught that the Temple Mount has no connection to us anymore, that it's not for us, that it's something ethereal, that it's some never land that God will take care of. And all that has changed. All that has changed is now there's more than one generation of Jews that understand that they've been sold a bill of goods, and that the only way that anything is going to change is if we demonstrate how important it is to us. And that's really happening. It was so amazing to see the amounts of Jews that are ready to take a stand, a real stand for the rebuilding of the Holy Temple.
And as you pointed out before, there were Jews from all over the country on Sunday, and of course people are fasting, and to be there at 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning, you have to get on a bus, at 5 in the morning from some places. And not only were they from all over the country, but there were religious Jews and secular Jews and ultra-Orthodox Jews. The entire spectrum of society was present, and of course this is a big shot of adrenaline in the arm of the entire Temple Mount movement. And
the Temple Mount movement is the Jewish people.
Yeah.
We have to stop using that expression. There is no more Temple Mount movement. This is what we saw on Sunday, that it's not a movement. It's the Am. It really is the heart and soul of the people. It's working and it's changing. And the very fact that as we stood online and that we one headline came in that Netanyahu declared that the Temple Mount is going to remain closed to Jews today, and we stood there and just couldn't believe it. And then not long after that, he either changed his mind or something happened. But it was felt that this is the will of the people that can't be ignored.
And I will say one other thing, that one reason why we stood online, we weren't standing online simply to protest or to make our presence felt, but we had heard already from Erdogan that he was going to do everything possible to keep it open, and he has come through in the past. And so there was a tremendous amount of I think, hope and good faith, which prevailed.
And thank God we were able to really demonstrate our feelings about Tisha B'Av, that it isn't just a day of remembrance or mourning or sadness or gloom or hopelessness, but it's a day of action, and it's a day of rising up, our whole people rising up and expressing their heartfelt desire to bring about change as best as possible, to do our part towards the rebuilding of the temple. Stay with us, Temple Talk.
Shalom and welcome back to Temple Talk. This is Yitzchak Reuven with Rabbi Chaim Richman here in Jerusalem, Israel. Today is the 12th day of the month of Menachem Av, 5779. It's the 13th of August, 2019. And this coming Shabbat is Parshat Va'etchanan. It's known as Shabbat Nachamu because it's the Shabbat of comfort following Tisha B'Av, which was this past Sunday, which what we've been talking about the entire first half of the show. And I also mentioned that this coming Friday is Tu B'Av, the 15th of Av, that very beautiful holiday, which we'll be talking about in this half. But to open up, Rabbi, I want to say about Va'etchanan, and I beseeched God, Moshe says, to let me into the land, to let me see the land and the good mountain. And the good mountain, of course,
Lebanon.
Lebanon is refers to the Holy Temple.
The good mountain is an allusion to Jerusalem, and Lebanon to the Holy Temple.
Is the Holy Temple. And I just want to say, I was so aware this past week on Shabbat, when it was actually Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av actually fell on Shabbat, and of course the fast was postponed for a day, that you and I, Rabbi, and everybody else here in Israel has merited what Moshe did not. You know, Moshe, he was the man of God, and he brought us out of Egypt, and he brought us the Torah, but he did not merit what we have merited This is a huge, it's a mystery. As much as we can talk about it and explain it, why Moshe wasn't let in, it's a mystery to me why I'm here and he never got to be here. But it's also a huge responsibility that we all have, because we have to fulfill what Moshe began.
And the whole parsha is so there's so much pathos, because it
Poignant.
expresses poignancy, because it expresses a tremendous love that Moshe has for the land of Israel, and he's saying, I won't be there. You're about to. This is the whole point of the book of Devarim. His 5-week discourse is preparing his people for the achievement of their goal, entering into the land. But he's not going to be joining them. And he says, Hashem became angry with me because of your deeds, and he swore that I would not cross the Jordan and not come to the good land that Hashem your God gives you as a heritage. For I will die in this land. I am not crossing the Jordan, but you are crossing, and you shall possess this good land. And even though God made a vow, as it were, that Moshe was not going to be coming in, still, despite that oath that God made, Moshe prayed to Hashem to allow him to enter the land. That's the word Va'etchanan. I implored God at that time. Our parsha opens with those words. I implored Hashem at that time, saying, and the word Va'etchanan, and I implored, I beseeched, I begged. These are all accurate translations. And he said, Hashem Elokim, you have begun to show your servant your greatness and your strong hand. For what power is there in the heavens or on earth that can perform according to your deeds and according to your mighty acts? Now, let me now cross and see the good land that is on the other side of the Jordan, this good mountain and the Lebanon. And this is a reference, our sages teach us, to Yerushalayim and to the Holy Temple. Moshe didn't want to see Lebanon. Our sages teach us that the good mountain refers to Jerusalem, and Lebanon is the Holy Temple, because Lebanon, the root of it is Lavan, white, and the Holy Temple whitens, as it were, lightens the burden of man, the sins of man. It's the whitening agent. But his prayer, actually 515 special prayers that Moshe offered, the numerical value of the word Va'etchanan, we are taught that he prayed 515 special prayers begging Hashem to rescind his decree. Moshe pleaded with Hashem. He wants more than anything to enter into the land. It's like the only thing he's ever really wanted. He begged Hashem and offered these 515 prayers, supplications, beseechings to be allowed into the land. And it didn't work. Although, we'll put it this way. Moshe's prayers failed to accomplish what he wanted. And all of us are sometimes bothered by a feeling that maybe, we're praying for something and they go unanswered. But what happens to prayers that go unanswered? They're not wasted. They don't go off into the universe. And that's what I'm thinking, that, we stood on the Temple Mount on Sunday, and I was thinking how befitting it is that this week is Parshat Va'etchanan, which begins with Moshe's prayer, containing an allusion to the Holy Temple, because and the fact that this Shabbat Nachamu, the Sabbath of Consolation, always falls out also in Va'etchanan, because it's like the Parsha is reaffirming to us that every prayer is answered, because when we stood there, with as history is being made with this 1,729 Jews, it's like that's what Moshe wanted. He wanted to show us the Holy Temple. He said he wanted to see the Holy Temple. So he gets like a vision, and we see Moshe Rabbeinu there. It's like we saw his prayer come true, is what I'm trying to say. He showed everyone the place of Mount Moriah. And Moshe's prayer was really for us. It was for his people. So it all works out. And by the way, we didn't explain the reason that this is called Shabbat Nachamu, the Sabbath of Consolation, comes from the words from Isaiah chapter 40. Comfort my people, says your God. This is the Haftarah for Shabbat. Console Jerusalem and cry to her that her transgression is appeased. You that bring good tidings to Zion, get yourself up into the high mountain. You that bring good tidings to Jerusalem, lift up your voice with strength. Lift it up, be not afraid. Say to the cities of Judah, behold your God.
This is the first of 10 seven Haftorah readings? Right.
This is actually the first of 7 Sabbaths of Consolation, which lead up to Rosh Hashanah. So in a manner of speaking, this Shabbat is the beginning of the period of the High Holy Days, really, and actually Tu B'Av. Tu B'Av is the point of
departation.
movement. So it's amazing how much the Torah portion, which also contains the restatement and the reframing of the Ten Commandments, and Moshe says, from heaven he caused you to hear his voice in order to teach you, and on earth he showed you his great fire, and you heard his words in the midst of the fire. Everything is about this climax, to bring you, to give you their land as an inheritance as this very day. The whole point is this preparation. And like you said, it's something that we feel so strongly, that we are able to be here and fulfill this dream of Moshe's.
Also contains the Shema in this week's Parsha.
And that is the subject of this week's video lesson, the preeminence of the Shema and how it appears in this week's Torah portion.
So I guess we'll save a discussion of that for this week's Torah lesson, video lesson.
So Thursday night, Friday, begins the festival of Tu B'Av, the 15th of Av. Tu B'Av, literally the 15th day of the month of Av, which was described in the Mishnah in Tractate Ta'anit, described by our sages as one of the happiest days of the year. In fact, this tradition is that in the time of the Holy Temple, when the Holy Temple is standing, the two happiest days of the year are Yom Kippur and Tu B'Av, the 15th of Av. So even though just this past week we were literally girded with sackcloth, the rock bottom of the human condition, mourning, we kept saying this month is called Menachem Av, the compassionate Father, and that whole profound lesson about everything that God does being and allows to happen being a manifestation of His love. It's even though this very month the name is synonymous with the destruction of the temple, everything is with love and concern. Every manner of breaking down is in order to rebuild. And indeed, according to our sacred tradition of our understanding, this month begins to turn around during the second half, and this is a sublime illumination of hope and love that begins to shine forth from the 15th day of the month. And the Mishnah talks about how on the 15th day of Av, the young unmarried girls would go out into the fields. This is actually in the Bible taking place in the area of Shiloh, of Shiloh, where they dressed in white and they would dance, the aim of catching the glances of the onlooking boys. Each girl would wear a dress borrowed from another so that no one would be judged unfairly by the boys. And this actually comes from the book of Judges, chapter 21. They said, "Behold, there was a yearly holiday unto Hashem at Shiloh." And there are many different explanations that are given in the Talmud about the importance of this day. Many intertwined events that occurred on this day. They're all connected at their spiritual roots. It's the day after entering into the land of Israel that the tribes of Israel were permitted to marry into each other. It's also the day much earlier in history when the generation of the desert who had been condemned to die on account of the spies' evil report, they stopped dying in the 40th year on the 15th of Av. And it was on that very day that the spirit of prophecy returned to Moshe, because during the years of the decree against the people, there was no spirit of prophecy in the world. It's long story short, it's a day of unique spiritual yearning and promise, divine assurance and consolation. It's a day of the unity of all of Israel. And most of all, it is a day that is focused upon the singular, eternal, and unconditional love that God has for the Jewish people. And there's also, by the way, a tradition that connects directly between the 15th of Av and the future building of the Third Temple, because it's the day that expresses God's unequivocal love and compassion for Israel. And that love will be ultimately manifested through the rebuilding of the Holy Temple and the resting of the Divine Presence, which is, of course, for the benefit of the entire world.
It's also the 7th day following the 9th of Av. And as we know that during the Second Temple period, when there was no mourning on the 9th of Av, as the temple was rebuilt, that between the beginning on the 9th and all the way through the 15th was a festival,
Yes,
basically, in the Holy
exactly. It was
Temple.
it was a
And God
holiday
willing,
in
we'll
the
have
time
that
of the
again.
temple from the 9th of Av all the way through this very week,
Yeah.
through the 15th. It was a festival.
So I'm looking forward to that, Rabbi.
And you know that the in modern Israel today, even while the temple has not yet been rebuilt, in our time, this day, the 15th of Av, which is this Thursday night, Friday, is a day traditionally of brides and grooms.
Mm-hmm.
It's a day of betrothals and marriages and expressions of love. Again, it comes anciently from the Mishnah that explains that the daughters of Jerusalem in temple times, dressed in borrowed
it comes
white
from the Book of
gowns,
Judges.
would go out to dance in the vineyards.
Yeah.
But all these customs and even this idea of the day being a day of matrimony, it's only a symbol for Israel's true great love that shines forth on this day, which is our relationship with God. It's an overwhelming spiritual energy reverberating, and this is really where it comes from. And even the joy of a bride and groom is only a symbol for the great joy of reconciliation between God and man. That's what it's really all about.
And that, of course, involves the Holy Temple as well. Speaking of the Holy Temple.
This whole concept of this incredible transition from the 9th of Av to the 15th of Av is really the very essence of the Jewish experience, the quintessential Jewish experience. What it means to be a Jew, this is the true definition in its purest form. A few days ago, we mourned the destruction of the Holy Temple, and now we are preparing to dance and celebrate the potential for its immediate restoration. And that's the whole idea of anything being possible with God. And again, as I have mentioned, the very essence of this whole experience of the transition from the 9th of Av to the 15th of Av is defined, is perfectly summarized in Psalms 30. Psalms 30, which is the beautiful psalm, which is the song for the inauguration of the Holy Temple, conjures up the images of the extremes of the human condition, going from joy to mourning and back and forth. I will exalt you, Hashem, for you have drawn me up and not let my foes rejoice over me. Hashem, my God, I cried out to you and you healed me. You have raised up my soul from the lower world. You have preserved me from my descent to the pit. And the verses here describe extremes of experience.
Sounds like this Tisha B'Av.
In the evening one lies down weeping, but with dawn a cry of joy. I had said in my serenity I would never falter, but Hashem, all is through your favor. You supported my greatness with might. Should you but conceal your face, I would be confounded. And the verses go on and end with, you have transformed my lament into dancing for me. You undid my sackcloth and girded me with gladness.
This is what happened on Sunday.
That's
right?
exactly it.
That
Exactly, that verse is so important because that is the transition from mourning to dancing, which is what this whole week is really all about.
Yeah, but I mean that's what for us. That's what Tisha B'Av was. I mean, I mentioned that we were waiting in the line on Sunday in the heat, and people were saying, dirges, etc., etc. Then when we went up on the mount, people were singing and joyful, and in an instant, our spirits were lifted. And if that's not a metaphor for the Geulah, for the redemption, then I don't know what is, because just in a moment, God can lift you up and change everything, change your entire reality.
The whole preeminence of the land of Israel in this week's Torah portion is so overwhelming, and the message is so clear. Again, the irony of Moshe not being able to go in, and yet his heartfelt efforts to exhort his people and to warn them that they don't want to lose the land, that they want to be able to maintain their level of holiness there, and how the commandments are being given in order to be fulfilled in the land. And looking at our generation, looking at at the Jews who do decide to come here, and as opposed to those that don't. It's like, it's crazy. It's hard to explain, and it's hard to understand those Jews that do not understand or appreciate why they should be here. It's like a different,
completely different reality.
A different reality.
Yeah, we're in a different world. We're worlds apart, which is unfortunate. I encourage everybody to join our world, because life here in the land of Israel, with all its imperfections, with all the warts of Israeli society today,
what warts are those exactly? I don't really see any warts.
There's plenty of imperfections. But,
American Jewry is
no.
the example of.
What I want to say is that you can point to, but you have this problem, that problem, and this and that. But the adventure here, the spiritual adventure that is our daily life, is incomparable. It doesn't exist anywhere else. We live in a land that has a spiritual dimension to it that is with us at all times. You don't have to make it happen. You don't have to conjure it up. It's there. It wakes you up in the morning and greets you in the morning, and it's with you when you go to sleep at night. It's a reality here, a spiritual reality that is every bit as real as the physical reality here. And it's all-encompassing.
And all these verses in Parshat Va'etchanan that describe coming into the land, the good land, and Moshe says, "This is the commandment and the decrees and the ordinances that Hashem your God commanded to teach you to perform in the land to which you are crossing to possess it. On the entire way that Hashem your God commanded, you shall go, so that you shall live in it and will be good for you, and you shall prolong your days in the land that you shall possess." I don't know, what do people do with all of these verses? Do they think this is just poetry? Do they think it's just,
Even the commandment, of one of the 10 commandments, which is repeated in this week's Parsha of honoring your mother and father, is to prolong your life in the land. It's all about the land, and it's going to continue to be all about the land all throughout the book of Deuteronomy. And the message is quite clear that for all its universality, the Torah is rooted in the land of Israel, and that root is that's those roots are what nourish our lives, and what enables us to be universal, to express ourselves in universality, because we're rooted here. We're not simply a religion or a set of ideals that's disconnected from the physical world. We Torah and the Jewish experience are completely rooted in the land of Israel, and that's the whole secret to it.
So may this month really bring consolation and blessing to all of us, all over the world, to the land of Israel and the whole world. And may we really see this before our eyes come true, this transition from mourning to gladness, from sackcloth to dancing, from destruction to rebuilding. The whole concept of this month of the Consoling Father, the Shabbat of Consolation, and the whole process of destruction to rebuilding is the stuff of our lives. It's really what we are experiencing and what we're a part of in the whole historical continuum of the redemption that we are part of.
So, we're about to begin our ascent toward Rosh Hashanah, toward the High Holy Days, which is 7 weeks away. Wow. And it's always kind of startling, because we have 3 weeks of this mourning period in which we're just totally focused on that, and then all of a sudden, wake up and start getting ready. And I guess that's what we're going to be talking about and obsessing over for the next 7 temple talks as they come up.
Away now.
Hmm?
Don't give anything away.
Any
big surprise there.
spoilers. But yeah, things are going to start picking up about now. There's a line from a song where I haven't done anything about now. How does that go? You remember that? You know the line I'm thinking of?
I think so.
How does it go?
Oops, we're out of time.
Are we out of time? Wow, you're right. We're about to hear that music. Anyway, once again, it's been an amazing historical week this week, and we're glad to share it with everybody here on Temple Talk. And here is the music. So thanks for being with us. We'll be again next week, God willing. Temple Talk.